I spent 6 agonizing years locked in a windowless, soundproofed concrete bunker, forced to act as a domestic slave for a man who literally helped my weeping parents pass out my own missing posters. And when I finally smashed my way out, his defense attorney stood in a federal courtroom and actually argued that because I never tried to kill myself, I was a willing runaway, seeking a rent-free lifestyle. If that doesn't make your blood boil and your vision go red,
I don't know what will. But let me take you back to the very beginning, to exactly how this living nightmare swallowed my childhood whole. And more importantly, how I clawed my way out of hell and turned my captor's life into absolute, irredeemable ashes. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. I had just turned 12 years old. The air was crisp, the leaves were turning orange, and the world felt entirely safe. My mom was baking for a school fundraiser and realized she was out of vanilla extract and cinnamon. Being the helpful oldest daughter, I grabbed my bicycle and told her I'd ride down to the corner grocery store, just 3 blocks away. I never made it to the store. On my way back, cutting through an alleyway to save time, I passed the house of Mr. Richard Hayes. Everyone in our suburban neighborhood knew Richard. He was the friendly, pudgy, 50-something neighborhood watch captain. He organized the summer block parties, he mowed the lawns of the elderly widows, and he handed out the best candy on Halloween. He was the definition of harmless. As I pedaled past his back fence, he called out to me. He looked distressed, holding a flashlight. "Hey, kiddo, thank goodness," he panted, wiping sweat from his forehead. My new golden retriever puppy squeezed through the grating under my back porch. I'm too big to fit under there, and I think he's stuck on some old wire. Could you just shine this light and see if you can grab his collar? I was 12. I loved dogs. I didn't hesitate. I dropped my bike, took the flashlight, and crawled into the dark, damp crawl space beneath his massive wooden deck. "I don't see him." "Mr. Hayes?" I called back over my shoulder. I never heard his reply. I only felt the sudden, crushing weight of his heavy boot kicking me squarely in the center of my back, driving the breath from my lungs and sending me tumbling face first down a steeply angled concrete chute I hadn't seen in the dark. I hit the bottom hard, scraping my face and arms. Before I could even scream, a massive, custom-built steel hatch slammed shut above me. The heavy clang of a deadbolt sliding into place echoed through the darkness. In a fraction of a second, my childhood was over. I woke up under the harsh glare of a single caged LED bulb. I was in a room no larger than a standard walk-in closet. The walls, floor, and ceiling were thick, poured concrete. There was a bucket in the corner, a thin foam mattress on the floor, and a heavy iron chain anchored to a steel ring in the wall. The other end of the chain was padlocked around my right ankle. An hour later, the heavy steel door creaked open. Richard Hayes stepped in. The friendly neighborhood watch captain was gone. His face was cold, his eyes devoid of any human empathy. He threw a pile of oversized gray sweatpants and a t-shirt onto the mattress. "If you scream, you don't eat," he said, his voice flat and terrifyingly calm. "If you cry, the lights go off for 2 days. You are going to keep this room spotless. You are going to sort my recycling, mend my clothes, and do exactly as I say. You belong to me now." I screamed. I screamed until my vocal cords tore and I was tasting blood. I hurled myself against the heavy door, beating my tiny fists against the steel until my knuckles were raw and shattered. He just turned off the light and walked upstairs. The worst part of those first few months wasn't the darkness or the cold or the canned dog food he fed me when I disobeyed. The worst part was the sound, because the basement wasn't entirely soundproof. Through the thick concrete ceiling, I could hear the muffled sounds of the world above. 3 days after I was taken, I heard the heavy, panicked footsteps of police officers walking through his living room right above my head. I heard the muffled, hysterical sobbing of my own mother. Richard had invited them in. He was serving them coffee. I heard him say, in that warm, comforting voice, "I saw her riding her bike past the alley, officer." She waved at me. If I had known, I would have walked her home myself. I screamed. I banged the chain against the floor. But the acoustic tiling he had installed beneath the floorboards swallowed the noise. My mother was 10 feet above my head, weeping for her lost daughter, and she couldn't hear me. Years bleed together when you have no windows and no clocks. 12 became 13. 13 became 15. 16. I became his ghost, his subterranean slave. I was forced to clean his tools, polish his shoes, sort endless boxes of garbage, and sit in absolute silence while he watched TV upstairs. He played psychological games, bringing down newspapers with articles about my parents giving up hope or the town moving on. He wanted to break me. He wanted me to believe that the world had forgotten I existed and that he was my only God, my only provider. But Richard Hayes made one fatal miscalculation. He thought he was raising a broken, submissive pet. He didn't realize he was forging a weapon. As I grew older, my terror slowly crystallized into a cold, diamond-hard rage. I stopped crying. I stopped screaming. I became completely, terrifyingly compliant. I said, "Yes, sir," and "Thank you, sir." I made him believe he had won. I made him comfortable, and complacency is the enemy of security. By the time I was 18, Richard was getting sloppy. The arthritis in his hands was worsening. Sometimes he wouldn't lock the padlock on my ankle chain all the way, just clicking it shut without spinning the dial. Sometimes he would leave the heavy steel basement door cracked open for ventilation while he was doing laundry in the adjoining utility room. I began to prepare. For 6 months, using a small, jagged piece of metal I had snapped off the handle of my waste bucket, I slowly chipped away at the concrete around the heavy iron water pipe running along the floorboard. I didn't break it. I just loosened it enough so that with one massive pull, it would snap free. It was a Saturday in mid-July. I knew this because I could hear the booming bass of a stereo system and the laughter of dozens of people in his backyard. It was the annual neighborhood summer barbecue. Richard was hosting. He came down to the basement around 3 p.m. He was drunk, smelling of cheap beer and barbecue smoke. He was sweating, his face red. He opened the steel door to my cell, holding a plate of half-eaten ribs. "Happy Saturday!" "Rat," he slurred, tossing the plate onto the floor. He didn't notice that the chain around my ankle was already undone. He didn't notice the iron pipe gripped tightly behind my back. He turned around to lock the door behind him. I didn't hesitate.
I didn't scream. With 6 years of repressed, explosive fury, I swung the heavy iron pipe with every single ounce of strength in my 18-year-old body. Crack! The pipe connected squarely with the back of his knee, shattering his kneecap.
He let out a blood-curdling shriek and collapsed onto the concrete floor, dropping his keys. Before he could even process the pain, I brought the pipe down again, this time across his jaw. His eyes rolled back into his head, and he went limp, choking on his own blood. I stood over the man who had stolen my childhood. I could have killed him right there. I wanted to. But death was too quick. Death was an escape, and I needed him to suffer the way I had suffered. I grabbed his keychain. I stepped over his bleeding body, pushed open the heavy steel door, and walked out of the cell for the first time in 6 years. I walked up the wooden basement stairs. My legs were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I unlocked the deadbolt at the top of the stairs and stepped into his kitchen. The sunlight pouring through the windows blinded me. I fell to my knees, gasping for air, overwhelmed by the colors, the smells, the sheer vastness of the world. I was wearing ragged, filthy sweatpants. I was severely malnourished, my skin a sickly, translucent pale, my hair a tangled, matted mess down to my waist. Outside, the barbecue was in full swing. Through the sliding glass door, I could see my neighbors. I could see the Johnsons. I could see the Miller family. And then I saw my father. He was standing by the grill, holding a paper plate, looking older, his hair completely gray. My mother was sitting at a picnic table, forcing a polite smile at a joke someone was telling. They still lived in the neighborhood. They had come to the block party. I pushed the sliding glass door open. I stepped out onto the wooden deck. The music was playing a cheerful pop song. People were laughing. "Excuse me." My voice was raspy, unused to speaking above a whisper. It barely cut through the noise. I took a deep breath, and with lungs that had been starved of fresh air for 6 years, I screamed, "Mom!" The music seemed to instantly cut out. The laughter died in an instant. 50 people turned to look at the skeletal, filthy woman standing on Richard Hayes's back deck. My mother dropped her plastic cup. It hit the grass in slow motion. She stared at me, her eyes wide, uncomprehending. My father froze, his face draining of all color. "Mom? Dad? It's me!" I sobbed, collapsing against the wooden railing. "It's me. He's downstairs. He's in the basement." The next 20 minutes were pure, unadulterated chaos. My father let out a sound I had never heard a human make, a roar of pure, primal grief and rage. He charged past me into the house, followed by 3 other men. My mother sprinted across the yard, falling to her knees on the deck and pulling my frail body into her arms, screaming my name over and over again, rocking me back and forth. Inside the house, they found Richard Hayes trying to crawl toward the stairs. My father and the neighbors nearly beat him to death before the police sirens finally pierced the air, pulling them off his bloody, broken body. The trial was a media sensation. It made national headlines. Richard's defense attorneys were absolute scum. They tried to paint a narrative that I had run away from a strict household and sought refuge with an older man. Because the door had occasionally been left unlocked during his laundry days in the final year, they actually stood in front of a jury and argued that I was a willing participant in a disturbing domestic arrangement. They thought they could break me on the stand. They thought I was a fragile, traumatized victim who would crumble under cross-examination. They were dead wrong. When I took the stand, I didn't cry. I looked Richard Hayes dead in the eyes, and I systematically dismantled every single lie his lawyers told. I described the exact dimensions of the cell. I described the exact brand of dog food he fed me. I recounted the exact dates and times I heard my parents upstairs, identifying the clothes my mother had worn that day because I had seen her shoes through the floor grate. But the final nail in his coffin wasn't my testimony. While I was locked in that basement, I hadn't just been chipping at the concrete. I had been keeping records. Using the lead from a broken pencil he had accidentally dropped in 2015, I had written out an entire diary on the underside of the foam mattress. I'd recorded every threat, every beating, every psychological game, complete with dates, times, and corresponding events happening in the neighborhood above. When the prosecution brought the mattress into the courtroom and flipped it over, displaying thousands of lines of tiny, frantic handwriting, the entire jury gasped. Richard Hayes broke down sobbing at the defense table. It was the most pathetic thing I had ever seen. The jury deliberated for less than 45 minutes. Guilty on all charges. Kidnapping, false imprisonment, aggravated assault, and a laundry list of federal charges. The judge didn't even look at him when she handed down the sentence. Mr. Hayes, you have shown a level of calculated depravity that defies human comprehension, she said coldly. You will serve consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. You will die in a concrete box, much like the one you built for this young woman. And it will still be more mercy than you deserve. I didn't stop at criminal court. I hired the most aggressive civil litigators in the state. I sued Richard Hayes for everything he owned. I took his house. I took his pension. I took his life savings. I had the house demolished. Every single brick, every piece of wood, torn down to the foundation. I stood on the sidewalk with my parents and watched the bulldozers crush the concrete basement where I lost my childhood into dust. In its place, I paid to have a beautiful, open community garden built, filled with bright flowers and sunlight. It took years of intense therapy to learn how to sleep in a bed again, to learn how to be around people without flinching. But I refused to let him win. I refused to let the title victim define my existence. I took the money from the civil suit and went to college. I got my degree in criminal psychology. I now work with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, tracking down predators who think they can hide in plain sight behind friendly smiles and neighborhood watch badges. Richard Hayes thought he was burying a helpless little girl in the dark. He didn't realize that when you bury a seed in the dark, it doesn't die. It grows roots. It gathers strength. And eventually, it shatters the concrete.